Good afternoon. I'm Ana Gonzalez, Assistant Professor of the Stedman College of Business and also the Director of the Family-Owned Business Institute, also known as FOBI. For me, it's really a pleasure to welcome you to the Stedman webinar series. We've been doing this since April, I think, to help businesses navigate the uncertainty that the pandemic has brought to all of us, really, and share best practices. Thank you all for joining us today. The webinar that we have prepared for today is also presented in cooperation with FOBI. This is an academic center that champions and serves family businesses through scholarship, education, and advocacy. Our goal for today in this webinar that is called When Crisis Strikes the Family Business is to have an open conversation with an amazing lineup of family business leaders from West Michigan to talk about, ups and downs of what they have been facing throughout the pandemic, and also hear their perspectives about the future. Of course, we're going to focus on the fact that they are family businesses. I think that's our bias in terms of the panelists and myself. Today with us are Megan Guskey, President of Grand Rapids Metrology, Peter Hungerford, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of ADAC Automotive, and Todd Custer, President of Custer Inc. Megan, Peter, and Todd, thank you very much for being here today with us. Before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. The audience can ask questions. You just have to go and click on the toolbar on the Q&A icon. We'll be checking them and try to include them as much as possible in the conversation. So I'm going to stop talking and get us started. So the first question, I will ask you to maybe introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about the business, and tell us what you think, because I know that you all think that it's a family business. What do you think it is, family business? Let's start with Megan.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Guskey. I'm president of Grand Rapids Metrology, and our company is an ISO accredited technical services provider. So we help manufacturing companies all throughout the supply chain make sure that they're producing safe, effective, and useful products. So from measuring the diameter of a hospital grade needle to weighing a semi-truck full of raw materials, we are the most commonly used science that no one's ever heard of. Typically it's metrology, it's measurement. I am 5th generation family business management, and we're actually in the process of transitioning ownership as well from my parents. And we have been in business since 1922. So in a couple years, we're going to be celebrating our centennial, which is a pretty big deal.
Okay. Excellent. Let's thank you, Megan. Let's go on with Peter, please.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Peter Hungerford, Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer of ADAC Automotive. ADAC Automotive has been around since 1975 in West Michigan. We're a tier 1 automotive supplier. We service Ford, General Motors, Fiat Chrysler, Volkswagen, Honda, and our primary product line is exterior door handles. In fact, we're one of North America's leading manufacturers of exterior door handles. So when you get in your car today and you open the door, it's a good likelihood you may have a product coming right out of Muskegon, Michigan. So we're a family-owned business, unique, where we have 2 families involved. Our family is one of those. So I've been with the company now for just over 21 years.
Thank you very much, Peter. Todd?
Hi, everyone. My name is Todd Custer. I'm CEO and president of Custer Inc. Custer is a 2nd generation family business. My dad started the business in 1980. And we integrate space. So we empower people to do their best work, whether it's in the office, in healthcare, in education, hospitality type spaces. But we really focus on the interior of buildings. We don't build buildings, but we take the interior and integrate it with great flooring, great furniture, great technology, and try to make it a great space. So like I said, Dad started the business in 1980. He passed over his role as CEO and president to me in 2016. I have two other brothers that work in the business. So we are second generation and working our hardest to someday get it to the third generation. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Todd. So let's begin with the very first question on the topic. So tell us about the effects of the pandemic, and go back 6 or 7 months ago, or when in March, when we were, see this is coming to us, something's gonna happen very bad. So I mean, what were the effects? Let's focus on those first of the pandemic. What have they been, in all this time? Let's change the order. Let's start with Todd.
I try not to go back to those dark days in late March and April. For us, it was really tough for us. It was the first time. So we're a dealer of Steelcase. Everyone knows Steelcase, I think, and the largest global manufacturer in the world for office furniture. It was the first time in Steelcase's 120-year history that they've ever shut down. So as a Steelcase dealer, we shut down too, and we could not get on job sites. We could not get into Steelcase's systems to see where product is, where orders were, where shipments were. I mean, everything literally shut down. And it was extremely challenging. And from a leadership standpoint, we would have 2 meetings a day. So 2 Zoom meetings or 2 team meetings a day. And we just kind of talk about what happened today, what's going on, what do we need to be focused on, what are our priorities, how are our people doing, what's mission critical today, and just really, really key in on, keeping transparent to our employees, making everything visible, and trying to communicate as much as possible, not only within our leadership team, but to everyone across the board. And they're extremely challenging times, and I think it helped us grow as a team as well, because our communication even got better. But it made us really shift to a virtual platform, and luckily we were ready for that. But anytime when you have to overnight send everyone home, and everyone's working from home, and everyone needs to be set up at home from a virtual standpoint, from a furniture standpoint, of work from home type office furniture and things like that, we were able to shift pretty quickly. So it was a hard time, though. It was definitely a challenge.
So let me ask you something. How many employees do you have?
So between Custer and our flooring company, our electrical company, we have about 300 employees. Mm-hmm. And the one difference, so our office admin employees immediately went home, but we still had some essential work that we did for healthcare. So we work with a lot of hospitals and a lot of health systems. So think Spectrum Health, Mercy Health, Bronson Health in Kalamazoo. We were still operating, whether it was from a installation side, a labor side, or electricians were still out. We were still doing a lot of work on the operations side. So we had to figure out how to provide and keep those employees safe with the right PPE, but also make sure that our customers were accepting deliveries and were up and running. And so it's just a lot of communication every single day to say, okay, today, what job sites are shut down? What job sites can we get on? Are we legally allowed to be on site? There's just so many things that you had to deal with every single day, where the communication aspect was huge.
Thank you, Todd. Let's move on to Peter.
Sure. So I think there are a lot of impacts to the organization, but one, when I think of how we behaved among one another and how we interacted with one another, I look at how well we were able to be flexible and adapt our ability to learn. It started, frankly, for us in January. We have an international alliance. So together with some other partners, we have operations in China and India and Brazil. Our partners are in Germany. So the news started that this was spreading in China, we immediately began talking with them on how they're handling what's happening. First we were ensuring they were in good health. So we learned a lot, not only from our partners in China, but then from our partners in Germany. And by the time it became, crisis level here, we already had a roadmap and almost a phase escalation process that we were prepared for. Certainly when you're in it, you have to respond, and we had to be flexible. But that got us prepared. And then, as Todd was mentioning, we had daily meetings, if not more, just trying to learn, what do we know today? What new regulations or executive orders or CDC guidelines or travel requirements or what have you are now in place, so that we could further prepare our organization. We were really shut down from the beginning of April through almost the end of May, so for 2 months. And in automotive and high volume manufacturing, compare this to 2001 or 2008, even though there was a downturn, there was some economic activity. For those 2 months, there was no economic activity. And that was the big difference for us. So we had to ensure that we, as leaders, we could, as best as we could, understand the situation, have clarity in our communication, make sure that we were honest with our team members, but that we weren't going to sugarcoat it in any way either. So we spent a lot of time learning so that we could pass that along and formulate how we'd respond to respond to the situation, and then communicate that to our teams. And we did that continuously, and frankly, we continue to do that today.
Absolutely. And again, so how many employees? I know you have different locations.
Yeah, in our West Michigan operations, we have about 1,200 employees.
Thank you very much, Peter. Now, Megan, please tell us about the effects.
I will never forget where I was when the world started to shut down. I was actually at an industry conference in Las Vegas. And I remember saying, guys, I think this is going to be a big deal. And everyone's like, no, it'll be fine. And I don't know if this is reality, but I remember the plane taking off and like the lights of Vegas shutting down as we're taking off into the air. Yeah, that's a little melodramatic, but really it was just right. We got, one of the last flights out, and we were lucky enough to, and I say lucky, it's a double-edged sword. We were designated essential, or I designated us essential. I was not going to wait for someone to say, yes, you can continue to work. I was going to wait until somebody came and shut us down. But no, we have a lot of customers who are manufacturing cleaning supplies and food and medical devices and pharmaceuticals. And so absolutely, we had to continue to support them. And a bright spot in all of this is that our customers really came to us and said, we cannot continue to operate if you don't continue to support us. So that was a real confidence boost for us. But our support and our services usually take the form of our technical teams going on site and working on equipment in a production line or in the QA lab. And so it's already dangerous enough to have to walk into a different manufacturing environment where you don't know the safety precautions or, kind of the lay of the land. And so on top of that was, now I have to, we have to be concerned about our people walking into an environment where they may get sick. And so that just added another layer of stress and responsibility on everybody, because, we didn't know anything about this. And so while we were very lucky to stay open and keep our doors open and keep people productive and working, it was very, very stressful to every day send people out into the world, knowing that it's a very dangerous place. So I would not go back to that moment for anything in the world, but we absolutely overcame that fear. And I never had an employee say, no, I'm not doing that, which I think is a testament to a family business where we're not perfect. We don't have all the rules and regulations kind of like tied in a bow or how you do your job. But when things go crazy, we take care of each other. And so to not have anybody say, I'm not going to do that, was astonishing and amazing. And I'm just so proud of our team for just being really, really brave in a very scary time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Megan. Yes, and I haven't thought of that perspective. I thought, okay, good that you were essential business, but then again, we're all in this together, and we all depend on one another, right? To be safe, and you can control the others. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Now, so you've all discussed the effects on the business. What about the family side? You know, your family, they are, I mean, Todd, I know you work with your brothers and probably with your dad. So how did they feel, you know, throughout this, you know, how they, you know,
It was
supported you?
extremely hard on the family side. You know, my dad being a Gen 1 traditionalist was like, why can't we work? Why isn't anyone in the office? I don't believe this, right? It was like totally in shock. And it was just, and still is, that no one can come back to the office. It's still very confused on that. But it's very interesting. It was really hard personally on the family side. So I have four young kids, 4 kids under 7. And it was hard. I'm sure a lot of people have gone through this, where you're working from home, you're trying to run the business, you're trying to manage the business. At the same time, you're at home with your whole family, right? So your kids are trying to do virtual school. Everyone's yelling, everyone's screaming, and you literally can't leave your house. So that was an extremely challenging time of just trying to work through everything that was going on in the world, trying to calm anxieties of your people, be so transparent to your people every single day. And it was like everything was open. You know, I would start meetings and be like, hey, I may have 2 or 3 kids running in here. Just, I'm warning you now, like that might happen. And it helps so much of just being that transparent and being that open. But it was a challenge situation. And I think it was for a lot of our people, just trying to manage both worlds, right? Like your work world, trying to respond, trying to do things at the same time, trying to manage home life, and your kids being home, or your kids doing virtual school and trying to be a teacher. And mentally just trying to stay really healthy as well. I think that was the hardest part from a mental standpoint. But I think from a family business standpoint, a lot of good communication, I know, between my brothers and I, of just what's the right thing to do, right? And how do we approach this? And let's really be aligned. Our message to our people was people before profits, right? Like, we're not worried about making money or losing money. Like, we'll lose money, we don't care. We want to protect our people. We want to make sure they're safe. We want to make sure their family's safe. We want to keep them employed and paid. So how do we, you know, leverage the PPP dollars and really do the right thing? Say, okay, let's figure out how to keep people employed, how to keep them, you know, with healthcare and coverage and support. And so a lot of conversations with our family about, like, hey, this isn't just the Custer family business. It's all, you know, 300 of you within this business that we want to protect, and it's all your families. We're all in this together. So that was a helpful kind of perspective, and we had a lot of conversation.
Thank you, Todd. And I hear you, because when I think about my kids, you know, if mama's at home or dad is at home, they can play, right? Anyway, Peter, so you have 2 family, it's a 2-family business, right? So tell us about, you know, how the effects on the families.
Well, I think very similar. You know, the paradigms that we had in our business and how we work instantly shattered. Fortunately, when we had engaged in implementing Microsoft Teams, which we use extensively, and that's really been helpful, the ease of making sure we can connect. Because that was probably the biggest paradigm we had to get over, that, you know, teams that aren't traditionally work from home type of activities can get their work done at home. And part of it, our customers were doing that, our suppliers were doing that. So while our operations, you know, we had a skeleton crew there because we were deemed essential in that April and May time period too, we also recognize that we have to be flexible, and every group or every person may have different needs. And with 1,200 people, we just had to recognize that in the past, where we could have a handful of policies or procedures or practices that were good enough, we simply had to be flexible. Some people had young children they had to watch. Some people had a parent who was living with them that could have been in the high risk category. And, you know, we just had to break free of our paradigms and do the best job we can. And as leaders and as the family leaders, we had to support that, one. Two, we also had to emulate it. So in our headquarters building where I am right now, you know, it was essentially empty, and it would have been very easy to say, you know, 5 people, maybe the family can come back and we can work here. Well, we didn't either. We were, you know, sitting at our kitchen table or what have you on video conferencing. So we had to ensure not only do we say we're going to be flexible, we had to behave in that way too, which we did.
Yeah.
That's hard.
By example. Yeah,
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Now, Megan, tell us about the family side.
Yeah, I heard that my dad was saying he was forced into retirement, and you know, recently, and I was like, huh, what? If somebody says they're forced into retirement and their daughter is, you know, the successor, one may put 2 and 2 together that I forced him out. And then he said, no, COVID, you know, I had to stay home. And I said, okay, it'd be nice to lead with that, you know, and let's not confuse anybody. So he stayed away from the office because he and my mom are a little bit older. I felt the need to, if my technicians have to leave their home to work, I was going to also leave my home to work. And so I came into the office. I was kind of the representative of the family, the management. I'm here with you. And so I don't have any other siblings in the business. My dad is still technically CEO, but hasn't had daily management responsibilities in a while, ever since he was forced to retire. But I know that when things got tough, even though we stayed open, we were still, our revenue was still down a lot. And we didn't know if we were going to get the PPP or when this was going to end or anything like that. And so the family, we suspended all of our pay. We suspended the rent for the company because a different, you know, family company owns the buildings. And so we really took the hit as much as we could ourselves so that we could protect as many people as possible. And we did not lay anybody off. We're very proud of that. And the PPP helped, of course, but we made the decision very early on that we were going to bear the brunt of this, and for however long it lasted and however terrible it was. And I will say, typical family business is a little bit more conservative with how they use their money and their financial cushion, and we are no exception. We had no debt. We always kept a very healthy cash balance where, you know, before this, I entered the business in very good times. And I was like, wow, we could be using that money for something else, or we should, you know, make this acquisition. And my dad was very adamant that no matter what, we're not going to take on a ton of debt and we're always going to have some sort of cushion. And so I think that that's somewhat unique to a family business. And it certainly, we didn't need to tap into it as much as we thought, but it was some sort of a safety net that at least let us sleep a little bit better at night.
Thank you, Megan. So now let's talk about your responses to the pandemic, right? So now you hear, you know, all the time, we're reinventing ourselves or pivoting, right? That's what you hear all the time when you talk to business people. What have you done? What were your responses from? It doesn't have to be pivoting really, but how did you react to this thing? So Megan mentioned, I mean, people, we sent our technicians, but we had no idea, you know, if they were going to be safe or not. So what did you do about that? Let's start with Peter.
Yeah, you know, when I think of the word pivot, you know, I think of a drastic or an immediate change to your strategy, your practices, or your philosophies in a response to some, frankly, externality that's beyond your control, of which this was. But, you know, we didn't pivot that much. And some of our philosophies, maybe we did, but our strategy stayed the same, our mission stayed the same. For the most part, with the exception of what the accommodations we made for, entry screening and stuff, our practices stayed the same, and they're going to stay the same now. So, for us, there wasn't that much of a pivot in terms of how our business changed. I think where let me focus on where we did change. We now have a more heightened sense of safety and security. Being an industrial manufacturer, that's always been a part of our business. But, the level of precautions we have in place now and the communication and awareness that our team members have of, frankly, their own health is much greater than it was pre-COVID. So especially now that we're entering flu season, that's what we're looking at now. What's the difference? But our policy stayed unchanged. If you're not feeling well, if it's not a typical way you feel, stay home. Take extra precautions. Don't spread it. And unfortunately, that has come with some hard lessons. We've had in the 1,200 people, a few people who have lost loved ones in all this. In the beginning, I'm not sure everyone was convinced how serious it was, but over time, I think people recognize how serious it can be. It's not as serious for everybody, but for some people, it absolutely is. Well, business strategy wise and why we exist, the customers we serve, that didn't change. The safety element of it is probably the part that did.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Todd, what can you tell us? You said that you changed to more virtual, like your virtual platform, but then again, you redesign the spaces. So you have to so again, tell us about what you have done.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, similar to what Peter was saying, we didn't change our BHAG, our wing moves, our term goals, in order to priorities, right? Where actually when everything was happening, we were up north doing Q2 planning. And we're sitting there with our leadership team. We're like, none of this matters anymore. Like, we do have to pivot and go to more kind of day-to-day thinking and change our priorities in the second quarter. But, go back to what we want to do, long-term, and still have that goal and that mission and, our core purpose of why we come to work every single day. I think the biggest thing for us was that we really tried to focus more on health and wellness, and then focusing more on just mental health. And we did shift a lot of our people to at home. And it's interesting, in our industry, we do space, right? So we do office space. So how you look at office space and how you use your space, how you use your real estate, it's a big concern right now. Are more people going to work from home? Is that a viable option? What percentage of your people will work from home? Who will come into the office? So we had to pivot a little bit in terms of our response to our clients. And we wanted to be more consultative to our clients to say, hey, how can we help you navigate through this shift? Whether it's, retrofitting your existing spaces, whether it's adding protective barriers, whether it's, helping with social distancing and how you set up space to accommodate that. We just shift our mindset a little bit of, okay, let's think external, let's reach out to our customers and see how we can help in a lot of these different areas. At the same time, let's start to set up some of our showrooms. We have 9 different locations where we kind of had to maneuver and move some things around and add in barriers in certain places and add in, do some retrofits and order some new stuff. So we had to kind of live it, and we're still working on that, right? We're still trying to figure out what the return to better is. We keep saying it's not the return to the workplace, it's the return to better, because it is this new kind of hybrid type space where you may have more people working from home as their home base, but they are coming into the office. But why are they coming into the office? It's to communicate, it's to collaborate, it's to connect, it's to work in teams. And how does the space accommodate that? So our shift has changed a little bit more. And I think our employees have really seen a big change in just their kind of health and wellness and their mental aspect, because when they are home, they are taking more breaks. They are doing more stuff. They may take a break at 10 o'clock and go water their plants and get outside for a little bit and then come back. So you're seeing a little bit more of a shift on how people work, And at the same time, we're almost shifting our strategy of just how we work with other companies on their real estate and their spaces, and walk them through, help them navigate through some of these changes and how people want to work moving forward. So it's interesting how, in just a couple months, people's mindset shifts. Like, instead of managing from butts and seats, now you're managing from a distance, right? And how that changes people's perspective, and the trust aspect of it changes too. So there's a lot of things we're working on and trying to shift a little bit of our strategy, but long term, a lot of our our mission, our BHAGs, our winning moves are still kind of out there. So it's more of short term kind of switch right now.
Thank you, Todd. Now, Megan, please tell us.
Sure. So we had been trying to implement Microsoft Teams for about a year, and it was like, we're slogging along, we don't have time. The stay-at-home order comes on and we do it in 2 days. So we're more resourceful than we think we are when we have to be. And so the shift to virtual, the shift to using technology to communicate, I think, was something that was beneficial for us and something that was relatively new. We are almost 100 years old, and we enjoy a lot of the history and legacy and relationships that come along with that, but we also have to deal with some of the challenges of, well, this is the way we've always done it. And, we need to be talking face to face to be able to get our point across or work together. And so I still truly believe that, in-person collaboration is always the best, but when that's not possible, being able to be flexible and use technology to our advantage is certainly something that we have embraced finally. As far as, our business, I think, crisis creates clarity. And again, we have been around for a long time, and our competitive advantage is being helpful. And our customers need something, we will figure out how to do it. So we were doing a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and sometimes not at 100% because you don't have the bandwidth for that. So I think it really clarified what parts of our business are essential, are critical, are crucial, are things that they can't get somewhere else. You can buy a scale on Amazon. You can't buy an ISO accreditation on Amazon. You can't buy the repair and the consultative approach to, if you use this equipment correctly, your product will come out, more accurate, more effective, safe, all of that. And so really, really pivoting to focus on our services and our technical teams and what it takes to set them up for success was something that we were kind of batting around, but it certainly became very, very clear when all of our projects halted, all of our product sales halted, but our services still were, they continued to be needed and essential to our customers remaining in production. So that was absolutely a clarity moment for us. And also the communication and the connection that we have with our team. It's really hard when we're remote, when we're not able to see each other, talk to each other, hug each other, because everybody is freaking out and very stressed. But I think that, both Todd and Peter have mentioned it before, communicating often with calm, but without sugarcoating and with compassion. And I don't know all the answers, but I promise that we're going to figure it out and we're going to get through this together. And I think the companies, that my friends and family members work for that are larger and maybe, publicly traded or not family companies, it's like, just don't worry about it. Like, you'll know when you need to know. And that just creates this level of stress that's a distraction to what we're trying to do. So the more we can, I got really into the videos of just saying, here's where we are, here's what we're doing. And it's very awkward and very uncomfortable to film yourself in a video. But I was like, they need to see and hear what we're doing, and that, like, we've got it. we may not know all the answers, but we've got this covered and like, we'll get through it. And that was something that I didn't realize how important it was until all of this happened.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you, Megan. So I have a question from the audience for all of the panelists. And here we go. Would anyone suggest tips on how to find out hidden opportunities during a crisis? Any ideas? Anyone can jump in.
Repeat the question, I'm sorry.
The question is, would anyone suggest tips on how to find out hidden opportunities during a crisis?
Hidden opportunities. Well, you know, I think it's, at least in West Michigan, and then depending on, you know, the networks that exist between yourself and people within and outside the community, just listen close, talk often, be engaged in forums like this, and listen to where a skill set that an individual may have personally or the skills that an organization has, and look for those opportunities. You know, crisis is a perfect place for opportunity, and you know, probably a whole separate webinar on, you know, what are the opportunities that have arisen from this situation. There are many, and there are many things that are at play, whether in many different industries. So, you know, I think it's having a good self-awareness of what you or your organization brings, and being connected enough with the world to see where someone needs something and see if you can fill that.
Yeah, it's a great point, Peter. I was going to say the same thing. Like during the crisis, I connected with just a lot of other Steelcase dealerships across the country, right? With leaders, owners, other family businesses, and talked to them and listened and asked good questions. Other, you know, webinars, other forums, other, you know, where you could just listen and really gain insight. And also, you know, just conversations with the leadership team and our employees of just listening. I think it's a lot of listening is extremely helpful, because a lot of things come up, and maybe a lot of things you haven't thought about before when you're so, you know, reactive every single day and you're busy. But when everything does kind of shut down, you have a lot of time to listen and connect, especially with people outside of West Michigan too. It's very, very valuable.
Yeah, and I was going to, you know, I had this answer written down for a different question, but it's okay. I think it's really important we determined or defined 3 priorities that were going to drive our decision making during this pandemic, and they were in a certain order. So number 1 was the health and well-being of our team, our people. Number 2 was staying productive so that we can retain jobs. So if that means a product salesperson, no product, you're hustling, calling customers to try to get a service. You know, we were all hustling to try to keep the lights on so that we could all stay whole as a team. And number 3 was, how do we position ourselves in a place of strength coming out of this, where we can capitalize on some of the opportunities that, of course, always come out of a crisis like this. So having those kind of North Star priorities really helped us think about things, make decisions. And again, going back to having that financial health and financial cushion, I knew that not only could we survive this, but we can also start to capitalize on opportunities of customers or competitors that either don't survive or are having a really hard time. We've gained several new customers throughout this time. Just really not at all anything that we did, but customers reaching out to us proactively and saying, my provider won't answer the phone. I can't get a hold of them. And, you know, if somebody can't support you and you can't rely on a contractor in bad times, why would you want to in good times? So being very supportive of your customer base, saying, you know, we were sending out mass communications every week of like, here's a service or a flexible option to kind of combat the challenges that you're facing right now. And so just being creative. I mean, I think, you know, Todd, you said listening to your team, they came up with ideas that I would never think of that were really, really, really smart. So just not burying your head in the sand and breathing, listening, and just thinking outside the box is absolutely, you'll find opportunities you would never think of.
Well, thank you, Megan. All great tips on house. Thank you. So moving on to the questions that I had. So we know that family businesses organizational cultures are very, very strong, and that's in part because of the family involvement in the business across generations. How have your organizational cultures have changed, and what do you see in the future? I think Todd mentioned, or Megan, like the previous generation, hell, why aren't people working, or where's everybody? So tell us about that.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That connection and having some sort of relationship with your colleagues, your employees is really crucial. We had several like Zoom happy hours where I found things out of like some crazy pets that people have and what their cocktail of choice was. And it was taking a moment to just have fun and forget about all the really, really stressful stuff that's going on. I think that, we've become much more flexible with schedules and working from home. Something that I have been acutely aware of, although, it doesn't affect me personally, is just being very flexible with the women and the mothers who work for us, in that this, I feel, if we're talking about potential risks of the new normal, is the widening of the gender gap, in that, if school continues to be virtual and parents have to stay home, not always, but typically the burden of that does fall on the mother. And so talking about that, being aware and being super, super flexible with people, even if it may not seem fair or equitable employee to employee, based on just understanding people's lives and environments outside of work, has really helped kind of keep us together as a team and keep our culture strong, as we're not perfect, but we support each other when things go crazy. So yeah, that it's all about the people.
Thank you, Megan. Peter, you want to go on?
Sure. For us, I think it's finding ways outside of our standard responsibilities to foster the relationships that we have. And Megan touched on some of them. An example that we had at ADAC, where we're fortunate in our break room area, we have an outdoor patio. And when the weather is nice, we can be outside and still comply with the social distancing requirements, etc. Well, we did that, but we also have plenty of musicians in the organization, and we set up a little acoustic cafe over lunch, and we have different people showcase their talents, and it's just fun, right? It's something to get away for a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and have those relationships with our colleagues. And that's harder and harder to do. One of the impacts of the situation we're in, I think, is not the existing relationships, but the fostering those and maintaining those, but more importantly, the new relationships. We do a lot of web calls with our overseas colleagues, and because we've had years and years of traveling to see them, dinners, time afterwards to get to know them personally, it's easier to do those web calls and to do it virtually. But if I'm starting a new relationship, I don't know any of that. And you have to approach that differently until the time you can really have that social face-to-face time again. So we try to be mindful of that and bring that into our business so that we don't lose the relationships that we have and therefore hinder our culture.
Thank you, Peter. Todd?
Yeah, right. And I believe over the last 6 or 7 months, a lot of our connections and our culture has gotten stronger because a lot of teams have connected more. And I think Microsoft Teams, who we use, has really given people that option. So they're connecting every day, right? In Teams meeting, they're just calling each other, how are you doing? How's it going? But a lot of those relationships were already there and existing. And it's been really hard onboarding and bringing on new employees and new people because they don't have those existing relationships. And that's something I get nervous about, always thinking about culture and bringing on new people, new leaders, new employees. How do we do that effectively when we can't be with each other in person and we can't, have those normal activities that we would do for an onboarding experience? So that's something I'm still worried about, and something that I think a lot of organizations are worried about just from a culture side. How do you keep that culture going from a distance? But I think a lot of our people have gotten stronger and their connections have gotten better just because you're seeing a lot of their personal lives, right? Like you're seeing their pets, you're seeing their kids, you see where they live. You're just getting deeper, I think, than you ever would. And it's making the time to make those connections. Also from a leadership side, we've had a lot of our leaders just connect with different teams and different groups and gotten to know people more in depth than they ever would before. So it's an opportunity to enhance your culture just by connecting and offering those opportunities to do that, like company happy hours, musician. I love the idea of a musician playing, Peter. I think that's awesome. Just having some of this company type stuff where everyone can get on and be together, but also do that for individuals.
For sure. I don't know how.
Yeah, because no matter how pretty the day is winter, we need to be inside. Yeah. Absolutely. But I think it's very interesting that the three of you touched on the fact that even virtually, which is kind of a paradox, we become closer somehow, right? Like we have new opportunities to connect, which we could have before, but we just never did it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's very, very interesting. Now, so I take the opportunity of the last Todd's and Megan's comments to ask you about concerns about the new normal now, right? I know there's still a lot of uncertainty, but I mean, what are your concerns really? Besides the ones that you already mentioned.
Yeah, our business is all about going on site, is about working in other people's facilities and maintaining their equipment. It's pretty cyclical in our services, where our customers will say, oh, we can do that internally. And then they go through, the accreditation process. Whoa, nope, we can't. And so they outsource it, and so, I think the threat that there's going to be some limitation on letting outside people into your facility is, at least, specific to my business, something that we have to be aware of. We don't manufacture product, but we're a distributor for product. And so the supply chain hasn't hit us yet, but I think if things continue to spike, and if we go through, some sort of really the looming dark cloud that we just don't know, is if we go into some sort of lockdown again, whether it's us or our suppliers or our customers, like, I just don't think anybody knows. And, why not throw the cherry on top of not knowing who, what political power, how that might change things. So it is very, in business, you try your best to understand your risks and try to mitigate them through some sort of strategy. And the hardest part for all of this, and it's just my personality type too, is the unknown. It's really, really hard to form a strategy where you have no idea what the risk may or may not be. And so I think it's the unknown that is the scariest part about moving forward.
Thank you, Megan. Peter, you want to go on?
Sure, I'll add to that. And I think about it in two paths, the concerns I have. The first is recognition, and the second is, call it, self-awareness. The recognition side comes from, we look at COVID, and you hear a lot of, COVID caused this and the things that are happening. Well, I just think that's one of, I'll say, 4 or maybe even 5 things. we still have a fragile domestic and global economy. We do. We still have a surge in social unrest. We still have uncertainty in our political environment. And on top of COVID, recognize this is a 100-year event. You look back to the other events that we've gone through, whether it is the recession, whether it's 9/11, whether it's the Gulf War, we can go back to whatever other events we had, and weak economy. That's what it caused. So why I look at that is not to say, let's run for the hills. I'm not saying that at all. We do kind of have to face that. But we also have to recognize that there's a fundamental level now that exists in all of our lives of tension. So this capacity we once had to just fight and muscle through it, I don't think is there any longer, because it's being occupied by this tension that exists in the changes in our lives. So at one point we say, work harder, you can work 120%. Well, all I have is maybe up to 95% now. To use some numbers, I'm just using that as an example. So that's the recognition side. I think we have to recognize that. The other concern I have from the awareness side is, I'll take myself personally. Through this situation, I reconnected with myself, the things I enjoy doing, the hobbies I have, looking at where I was spending my time. I don't miss being on an airplane for 13 hours going to Asia. I don't miss, as much as I like social events, I don't miss a gala every night. I don't miss it, and I don't want to go back to it, and I'm choosing not to, right? I'm going to be much more limited in the things that I engage in going forward, and I'm going to be much more in tune to where I dedicate my time that makes me fulfilled, or where I can impact the lives of others, because that's, in the time I have left here, that's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. That this time has given me that perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Very inspiring. Yeah. Todd, concern.
Yeah, I would, I think the biggest thing that scares me is just the unknown of the future and the uncertainty, right? Like it's really hard to strategize, like even strategizing for 2021 and looking at next year and looking at some of our clients, they may be here or they may be here, right? It's like, and we may have 15 to 20 of those. And how do you forecast and budget and plan with talent, with resources, with infrastructure, with just so much unknown out there? I think that's really, really hard to run a business with that much uncertainty. I think the second thing that really I'm concerned about out there, people struggling with unknown, I think people's anxieties are really, really high. And it's like you said, you can only work so hard, right? At some point, you're going to hit a wall, and you got to really realize that. And I get concerned about our leaders, our friends, people in this world. All of us, we try to lead all our employees of everything everyone's dealing with right now. It's just really, really tough. And I think a lot of that is just the uncertainty. There's so much you can't control right now, and you want to control it, right? You want to have that control as a leader, but there's so much that we can't control, and you want to be proactive, but sometimes you're just so reactive, and it makes it tough.
Thank you, Todd. Now we're near the end of our time, so we usually like to finish this or wrap up with an kind of an optimistic view of what you think about the future. So can you give us your perspective? How do you feel, what's coming up?
I guess I'll start.
Go ahead.
I'm going to do it early. I think each one of us in different ways. I think this is forcing our society to make the necessary changes that are needed. Probably not all of them. You can't change everything all at once, but whether it's how our education system works, how business leaders function, what individuals, how they choose to spend their time and money, do we travel? And some of those I think are very, very positive. You roll the clock back just a few years and a dinner party with a bottle of wine or two, and you try to solve the problems of the world. All these topics came up, one way or the other. And now we're addressing them because they're real, and we have to, right? There's no choice. We have to change the way we're behaving between one another. We have to change the way some of our our governing systems work, or our education systems work, or what have you. And it's hard and it's disruptive, but I want to believe that when we get to the other side, we're going to make progress towards this ideal with all of these that we're hoping to get to. Thank you,
Peter. Megan, do you want to go on?
Sure. I graduated college in 2008 and was still, you know, as a new graduate, just very unaware of the world around me and the economy and all of that. So it was kind of like, you know, people in my generation we haven't seen something that we're like, can we overcome this? Can we drive through it? I don't know. As a leader, I'm like, well, I've led the company in really good times. So just acknowledging what we've been through and that we have persevered through it, and that if we can take this on, we can take anything on, I think gives us kind of a level of like grit and confidence. And I think that before this, the way that we were going of, it's all about technology and social media and AI, and you don't need people, and it's, you know, robots, and I think that this has very clearly shown us that it is still all about people, that we utilize technology to drive us forward or to, you know, enable what we are trying to do, but it is certainly not taking the place of human connection, interaction, and innovation, creativity, relationships, all of that. And so I think that's a really good sign for our future, that confirmed robots will not take over, at least not anytime soon, and that we need people. We need good people, and we need to create and maintain relationships.
Yeah.
Thank you, Megan. Todd.
Yeah, Megan nailed it. People, human connection. I mean, it's so important. I'm really excited about the future of work and how people work, and a new kind of paradigm of how people work and where people work, and having that flexibility, and the whole idea of working where it makes sense, and working when you do your best work. That may be 7 in the morning, that may be 8 o'clock at night, that may be 1 in the morning. And it's more, I think it will be more accepted moving forward. And it's something I struggled with within a family business. Like I said, Gen 1 for us, my dad was very traditional, and you had to be here at 7:30 and you had to leave at 6:30. And if you weren't doing that, you weren't working hard, right? And it starts to shift to, you know, when I came in a couple of years ago, it was more of, you know, I promote the flexibility, get your work done, manage by results, and do whatever you got to do to get it done. And you don't have to be in the office at 7:30, right? You don't have to be here at 6:30. And so I'm excited about some of the change in thinking and how this has changed how we work, and just you can be a little bit more flexible, and teams can be more flexible. And I'm excited for that opportunity. I'm excited for, you know, I haven't worn a suit in like 6 months, right? So I'm happy that I can wear jeans and a button-down shirt, and that's okay, right? That's acceptable now as a CEO. I don't have to wear a suit every day. So some of those things, just of how we work and our appearance and presence and change. But I'm excited that we all got to slow down a little bit, and by doing that, I think we have a new perspective moving forward, and focusing a little bit more on where we want to spend our time, how we spend our time. It's with each other, it's with family, it's with people we love, and that makes all the difference. So that's what I'm excited about coming out of this.
Well, thank you very much, Todd. So I think that, well, we may not be able to, you know, stop the natural consequences of this pandemic, but I think that we learned from Todd, Peter, and Megan that, you know, early preparation, you know, like Megan said, I'm not gonna let anyone tell me if I'm essential or not. Communication, you know, closeness, relationships, compassion, things that I think that they are very typical from family businesses. I think that we need to, you know, to embrace and keep cultivating, because that gives family businesses an edge. And I think that I've learned that from you. And of course, smart and innovative responses that you all had throughout the pandemic can reduce its impact, and any other crisis, I guess, impact. So thank you very much to the three of you, Megan, Todd, Peter, for your generosity, your sharing openness to share all this with us. To the audience, thank you very much for joining us today. The next webinar is going to be on November 13. It's titled Global Business Persistence and Perseverance During the Pandemic, and it's going to be in charge of the Panhandle Global Trade Center. So everyone, thank you very much again, and have a great rest of the day and weekend.
Thank you.